Welcome to another edition of Working with Gen Z. Friends, we've often said that Gen Z is a generation which is often stereotyped, saying that they have a shorter attention span, they are disengaged very quickly, and that when you think about the history with employers, they tend to also leave. There is a higher attrition. Now, we've covered in past episodes that what are some of the things that they look for from an employer, a boss, or a brand that they want to join. And one of the things that comes up repeatedly at the top is the fact that they wish to learn and grow. And every employee, perhaps in their fair right, will expect that. But when it comes to Gen Z, we know that the context is different. Here is a very digitally savvy generation. So, how do you make the learning happen? And we've also covered the ways in which Gen Z learn. But today we're going to kind of dive into one specific element and aspect of learning, which is becoming increasingly popular, not just for the Gen Z, but even for very senior leaders. And we'll understand all the elements and aspects of that. And I'm talking about how do companies, how do providers use gamification as part of learning? Okay, is it just about fun and games, or do we actually kind of make a learning out of it? So we'll explore that. And to help me with that is my guest, Bhaskar Tyakash. Bhaskar, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Nikhil. How you been? Happy to be in your show. I've read excerpts of your book. I'm looking forward to reading it. Some things an essential read for anybody who's either employing, targeting, or working with Gen Zs. So very happy to be here.
Fantastic. Bhaskar, thank you. I know you have been traveling, just returning back from a long trip to the US. So very glad you're taking this despite Friday evening on a late evening.
Happy to be. Yeah.
So before we dive in, Bhaskar, tell us a little bit about your story, just for our viewers, listeners, your background and the work that you do. And then obviously we're going to get into understanding gamification in the learning context for Gen Z.
Sure. To put it in a nutshell, I would say over the last 20 years, what I've done is essentially design games for learning, right? And in a very single line, if I were to say, that's what I've been doing. My focus has, however, been a lot on impacting what I call the human element within individuals, teams, and organizations, and using gamification as the learning methodology under the broader umbrella of experiential learning to really create learning journeys that are impactful, engaging, not in knowledge transfer mode, but really put the learner at the center, and create learning experiences around the space of what I call the human element, which is soft skills, behavioral skills. In an organization context, it's called competencies, values, culture. They take different words and different avatars, but essentially all of them encompass the humanness in in organizations and institutions. And I run a couple of organizations. One is a consulting and training company. Another is a technology platform where we offer game-based learning solutions to other trainers and educators to integrate these into their learning journeys. So essentially, over the last 20 years, that's what I've been doing.
Fabulous. Well, I'm very happy for you to be here because we're going to tap on your more than 2 decades of experience. So, Bhaskar, let's start with the very basics. I think for the Gen Z generation, the one gamification is not something that they need to know or they to be told, but just to let the base level make sure that we are familiar with. Can you explain just what do we mean by gamification? Are we talking about getting on like the back in the day Nintendo kind of a game? Are we talking about gamification in the learning context? What can you help us understand? What do we mean by that?
Sure. I'm going to divide this into two parts. One is the layman version and one is kind of the academic definition, right? The layman version is essentially any experience where we've been learning, playing games as from the time we are toddlers, right? And that's how we've been learning. And we've been learning either by playing games, observing games, being part of a game in many, many forms. The word gamification was coined essentially to signify anywhere where elements of game design are incorporated into any experience, right? Here we are talking about learning, but a loyalty program by an airline or a hotel is also gamification, right? When you walk into Starbucks and you get your card stamped for the fourth coffee and say 2 more coffees you get and you get a free coffee, that's gamification. Right? So essentially, these are all elements of games, whether it is rewards, points, being a leader, being a champion, badges that you get for achieving something. All of these are essentially were always part of games, elements that have been pulled from a game environment and incorporated into a learning environment is gamification of learning, right? Now, it takes two sides. One is where the learning is a game itself, so that you can call as a learning games. It's a separate subtopic called serious play, where a game is designed and everybody takes part in that game, and that game experience is then deconstructed later to learn. So if I were to use a very simple example, say you're playing a game of cards, you pick any game of cards. If before you play this game of cards, somebody teaches you how to play, right? That is a basic learning course where the teacher is teaching you, hey, Nikhil, if you want to play Rummy, if you want to play Teen Patti, you want to play poker, here are the steps. Here is how you should play. At the end of that learning episode, whatever that episode might be, if there is say a quiz or there are situations, Nikhil has thrown this card. You have these 5 cards. Which one will you want to throw? And that is incorporated into a real game situation. And then there is a quiz. And at the end, there are points. There are 10 people who are going through that course and Nikhil has come out on top. That's gamification of learning. If I were to play the game of Rummy, let the game being played by 5 people, and at the end there is an outcome, or even there is no outcome, even the game is stopped, and I ask Nikhil, hey Nikhil, at this point in time you threw this card, what were you thinking? When Bhaskar threw this card, why did you choose to this card? And when Nikhil says, I wanted to play it safe, I didn't want to take a chance, and as the same question is posed to Bhaskar, I said, I wanted to see if by doing this what Nikhil will do. There, I'm using the card game as a medium of learning to extract other things, whether it is decision making, strategy, whatever those might be. So this is really the distinction in a very layman language between a course, learning course, gamification of that learning course, or where the game itself is a learning medium. That's game-based learning. In a very layman term, that's what it means. In an organization context, if you go through a course and the course itself is designed in a manner that it feels like a game, there is Nikhil Superman, right, who is fighting the evil forces. And in order to escape a room that is where he has been locked in by the evil forces, he has to unlock this door. And to unlock that door, he has to complete a challenge. And the challenge is built around some content that I want that Nikhil to learn or someone to learn. And therefore, I built a story around Nikhil, the superhero, who has to vanquish the enemies. And to vanquish the enemy, he has to complete these 5 challenges. And when he does so, whoever does so tops the leaderboard and becomes the champion, right? Is essentially what gamification is really about. Right. So that's in a very loose, without getting academic, that's the definition of gamification.
No, I think that was very beautifully explained, kind of just for the simple layman. Now, Buster, the big question obviously comes, we're talking about gamification in the context of learning for Gen Z, because you're having the young generation entering workforce where kind of stereotype to saying, hey, this is a generation which has a shorter attention span, becomes restless quickly. I also want to learn, and therefore, what can the employers do, right? Therefore, naturally, learning is one big way to retain and build that way to kind of, get them hooked. If you think about, the Gen Z career path or the Gen Z aspiration, inspiration. The question is, what goes into the preparation of the gamification experience so that it creates the learning. So the danger, I suppose, that could be there for a Gen Z kind of a generation is that I'm having a great time, but have I learned something? And perhaps the biggest question that could be often asked is that has that diluted my intent of the very first intent of even you doing that? So, can you explain what goes into preparation and how do you ensure that the gamification serves a very distinct purpose, right? It's not thrown away saying we had a good time, which is important, but at the end of that, did we in fact learn something? So maybe just you can tackle those two,
Sure.
please.
Sure. So I actually have a counterpoint of view, having been in the trenches with designing learning experiences every day. I think actually that youngsters are very eager to learn and very eager to grow, right? Like you rightly mentioned. It is that the recognition that when a, a Gen Z was a student, school, college, etc., they went through learning experiences because they had to. Come organization reality, that pressure is not there. So therefore, they will only learn the things they want to. So the process of learning that was employed for teaching them things they have to learn cannot be employed for things that you want them to learn. There has to be an intrinsic motivation. Eccentric motivation will go only so far, right? So the application of gamification for learning in an organization environment has to first be seen in two buckets, Nikhil, right? The first bucket is functional, technical things that I need to learn in order for me to do my job, right? So engineers come with their computer science, engineering, and then come to the organization. Many of them know they are hardly prepared. You look at data all over, they're hardly prepared for the real work. And therefore, depending on which organization you are in, you have to learn proprietary technologies, proprietary platforms. Even if you're a finance guy and you walk into one of the big four or anything, there is tons of things to learn. You're an insurance, you're a BCom graduate, you've joined as an insurance sales guy in ICI, there is tons of things to learn at a product level. And therefore, there is that functional side of it. It could be mandatory things like cybersecurity or customer service steps, etc. Then there is the other side, which is the softer behavioral side. It could be leadership skills, it could be behavioral competencies, values, culture. And we have to clearly demarcate both of them because the application of gamification and game-based learning for Gen Zs is very different for both, right? Now, the mandatory trainings, everybody knows they have to go through it, right? And therefore, the motivation to gamify it is higher because even organization knows that it is in our interest that people absorb these elements very, very well. So if you look at, large organizations, I know guys like Accenture and all do a great job of their cybersecurity course. They have, because bulk of the people they're working with are Gen Zs, youngsters coming into the workforce. Lower half of their pyramid is very, very heavy. So they see the value, they invest good resources in building out games that, this content into a game kind of a format that can appeal to this audience. In terms of how organizations are deploying this and where does the employee think that it is just a game and I've not really gathered anything out of it, is perhaps more in the softer skill side than in the hard skill side. Because hard skill sides, I know I have to learn this if I have to do my job, right? And therefore, I have to consume that content. Gamification has just made it more fun, right? So that superfluousness to that content doesn't happen that much, right? But the challenge is that content, that gamification has to actually be done properly. So the problem is not actually that they are caught up in the game. The challenge actually is a lot of gamification is not done very well. So it actually doesn't challenge the learner. It feels very childish, to put it bluntly. So a lot of the gamification is you sign up, you get 100 points, right? You watch a video, you get 100 points. So that point has no basis. It has no credibility because it's so easily earned, right? And Some people who will just log in and they'll watch a video, they'll complete the video, there'll be, fireworks and confetti on your screen, and then it will say you won 350 points and some music will go on, right? The questions will be there, will not challenge the learner, and therefore the learner just walks through all of it, and then, everybody is at 2000 points and everybody is gained. Those kind of gamified learning elements are actually what is challenging the learner. It's not the other side, right? So on the content side, the challenge for content creators, the challenge for L&D professionals who are creating content is to recognize that Gen Zs are digital natives. They are constantly playing games. They're used to high-end graphics. They're used to even low-end graphics, but challenging games. They're used to being challenged mentally, right? And you throw something very, very simplistic at them. They feel, in my opinion, they feel that they're being treated as children, right? They're not being treated as adults. So the gamification design is a big area to focus. On the other side, where there are softer skills, organizations are only now, I think, especially in the post-COVID era, recognizing the true value of building these softer skills from day one, rather than letting trial and error take care of it, right? And now the area that we work heavily is in the use of serious games and serious gameplay in the soft skill area. And now we are seeing over time, from working largely with senior management or middle management, now we're doing tons and tons of work with freshers, new joiners. There's a lot of focus on culture immersion, values immersion, doing it in a manner that these guys can really imbibe it. So gamification for Gen Zs has to be looked at from these two lenses. And the challenge is really not today that they're so caught up in the game that the learning is not happening. The challenge really is to create things that actually challenge them.
Right. So the design has a big
Yes,
impact on
absolutely.
yeah. So that's
You hit the nail on the head, right?
yeah.
Um,
Okay. So one other question, Bhaskar, as a follow-up to that is that, okay, is there a distinction in your mind when people talk about gamification? Do they often use that word interchangeably with outdoor activities versus what is inside? So what are the two different things?
yes. So that's a great question, Nikhil. And it's something that I have been trying a lot, shouting from rooftop, saying that, you have to be able to use the right lingo to know each thing from the other, right? So the traditionally, gamification, if you imagine Venn diagrams, right? Gamification is the larger circle. Within that is the smaller circle of game-based learning and serious play, right? Now, gamification can start from just, if you do a content download, say suppose you're running a session today on say cybersecurity, and at the end of that session you organize a quiz, and each time somebody answers a quiz, you give them a badge, or you give them a chocolate, right? What you have tapped into is the individual's inherent drive to be part of a game, where the chance of win-lose is there. But even when I lose, I don't feel particularly bad, right? I feel bad maybe, but I've enjoyed being part of that game. So you do a quiz in a room, you're a trained facilitator, you do tons of programs, right? And when you do it, it's not that the person who has not got that question right is so dejected and is switched off, right? Everybody is in it for the game. So the gamification is really about eccentric motivating factors. So I'm introducing a badge. I'm introducing a quiz. I'm introducing a leaderboard. I'm introducing a persona who's, like I mentioned, like a superhero, who is the center of a story. I'm taking my content and converting it into a story. I'm creating that story differently for different personas. These are all actually elements from games that have been brought into a content dissemination experience. So that is gamification. So in this, the learning comes first, the play comes after, right? So I have gone through the whole content, then I'm now part of this journey and I have to get it right and earn my badges, right? So I've consumed a lot of content and then I'm going through the game. Games, which is games for learning, the order is reversed. I play the game first. And in that game, different people are involved and different people are bringing their instinctive style of working into the game. And then the learning comes after in terms of what did you do that worked? How did you impact the outcome? What did you do that didn't work? And how did that leave you with the learning for yourself, right? And the games typically are completely out of context from business. So you could be an aeronautics company and you could be taking part in a game which has got nothing to do with aeronautics or engineering or anything or your business. And because it's so out of context, everybody is just their natural self. And then as a facilitator, later you're putting a mirror in front of them saying, this is what happened. This is the consequence. It doesn't matter because it's just a game, but do you recognize your natural style of working? So if I were to tell Nikhil, are you a good listener? Chances are you will say, yes, I know listening is important. I never interrupt. I always pay attention to. But if I put you through a game experience in which communication is critical for success, and you find in the game that because the tensions are running high, I find that Nikhil is saying, hey, ruko, main batata hu kya karna hai. Right? I am saying, okay, you do this. Okay, you do this. I have not created a window to listen to anyone. That's the actual learning is taking place because you are getting a chance to understand the gap between what you know and what you normally do. So it's horses for courses. So gamification is very, very useful when there is a lot of content to be consumed. It's inherently boring and the learner has to be motivated to go through that learning experience, and their inner drive to engage in a game and be competitive is tapped into. It works. But that same thing doesn't work in softer skills, because in soft skills, knowledge is never the problem. I can put you through 20 different gamification. You will always land at the right answer saying, yes, communication is important. But the fact that you might not be a good communicator is never, revealed to you. So they are interchangeably used to people who say that, hame na thoda gamification karna hai. Right? So there is really, you hit the nail on the head. There is a lot of education that everybody in the learning space needs to go through to understand the nuances, understand the differences. Only then you will be able to apply the right thing in the right place.
Yeah. No, beautifully explained. I hope that all our listeners can really listen to that last few minutes where you talked about the very, very clear distinction on gamification and games and the learning after games. I think oftentimes people just use them interchangeably, not realizing, what's the sequencing and where the learning comes. So I think that was very beautifully explained. Now, let me ask, on the topic of gamification, other companies use it beyond, the learning in the L&D industry or the L&D function. What are some of the examples? Like, so for example, you mentioned like going to the Starbucks or getting reward points. What are the typical gamification kind of, if you ways in which to hook either a consumer or even a learner, just to kind of.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the gamification has essentially 3-4 key buckets, right? And those buckets have to be addressed, whether you're doing it for learning, whether you're doing it for any other consumer activity, loyalty, anything that you're trying to do, right? First is understanding the end behavior change that you want, right? Do you want a guy to recommend you to other people, that's an objective, right? And I'm not talking about learning. I'm just talking in general.
Sure.
You want the guy to buy more. That's an objective, right? Do you want the guy to buy more at one time? Do you want the guy to come back and buy multiple times? That's the objective. So gamification, whether it's learning, whether it is, it's all about the end objective is behavior change. That doesn't change, right? So you have to not jump into gamification and story and this and that till you have not nailed what is that end outcome that I want to be achieved. Once that is done, then you get into the mechanics of gamification, which is that a true understanding of my consumer, right? Of my learner. What are their typical patterns? You spoke about Gen Zs, right? So Gen Zs there are some things you mentioned, which is like they have to be, their attention spans are low, right? But you see the same Gen Zs, they'll start a game of Fortune and Fortnite, and they'll go on for 3 hours. So where is the attention span there? Right? The attention span is low because you're giving something. And unlike the past where you and I have muscled through things because we have to do it, these guys don't feel the need that they have to do anything.
Yeah.
So the attention spans are not low. We are giving their attention spans are low for things that are of little interest to them. Right? So, but yes, right? And therefore, if learning is inherently something that has inertia attached to it, we have to recognize that they like things bite-sized. One of the things they like is instant feedback. Right? You do now, you'll tell me now, have I done a good job, or not? Highly visual, right? They're exposed to so much, they're digital natives, they're highly visual. And one of the things they like, from what I have seen, is interactive experiences, right? In their own environment, if they work with people who, they accept things from their peers more than they will from others. And therefore, the more social the learning experience, the more social the interaction, in their own language, in their own way, they will absorb the things you want them to absorb. So anything we design has to be highly visual. It has to be challenging. It can't be something that is something that comes very easy to them. It has to be short, interesting, right? And in any gamification experience, these are built into the storyline, the personas that you are building for, the characters that you have built in your story, right? You and I might be excited about the historic kings and queens, right? But Gen Zs operate in a different, they don't care about history as much unless, it's told in a very interesting manner. And so apart from lingos and stories, one of the things that I have seen organizations that have got gamification down really well, they co-opt the Gen Z into the learning experience. Rather than let me tell you what you should learn, let us figure out together how you should learn. So at every point in your design, if you're able to work with a group of your learners and co-opt them in the entire process, you're likely to create something far more relevant to the audience than wear our own blinkers on what we think youngsters should learn. So anything that has storylines that they can relate to, characters that speak their lingo, that is short, quick, and that has instant gratification and instant feedback. It doesn't have to be good, but as long as it's instant feedback and the ability to redo, right? They're all used to games. In games, you don't do well in a level, you can come back and do that level again. You don't do it well, you want to further improve your score, you can come back and do it again. Right? And all through school, they have been subjected to one exam, one hit. You better get it first time right or you're screwed. Right? And that is why they hate the scholastics as a whole. Apart from, the 1% early adopters, everybody hates the exam process because you're putting me on a spot and not giving me a second chance. Right? So any learning experience that accounts for these things, then the points, badges, leaderboards are all incidental. Right? It's not why they learn for. But most learning gamification starts with these things. हर एक चीज में point दे दो. Just give 50 points for this, 100 points for that. Nobody cares about those points, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you mentioned this, Bhaskar. I'm curious, with all the work that you do with your clients and companies that you interact with, what have you seen beyond using gamification for learning, right? Do you have insights or access into looking at companies using gamification more generally as
Yes.
as a way to, for instance, the other day I was talking to somebody, they said that, some companies are trying ways in which they can gamify that career path. So they
Yes.
actually almost like when they come in, they don't say that, okay, this is the position you start and here's where it could be. In fact, they've gamified that whole. So, it's almost like I do this, then I could jump to this level. If I do that, I jump to the next level. So what have you seen? I mean, are there any example stories? And has that helped companies to create a maybe more productive workforce or a productive cohort for Gen Z, hence staying more and kind of more happier employees?
Sure. I mean, there are, definitely, there are organizations. I know, I've read, I don't have first-hand experience of having conversations, but organizations like SAP, some of the Salesforce businesses, they have gamified knowledge sharing, right? Where
So how would it work? Yeah.
so it would work in such a way that if there is, so there are many portals, right, in most of these guys where you can post your challenge, right? That this is the situation that I'm facing with this client. Anytime somebody offers a valid suggestion, right, they get points, right? If that suggestion has been implemented, then both the person who's implemented and the person who is who is given the suggestion, both get add-on points. And in the end, see, gamification for outcomes is the most obvious thing.
Yeah.
But what organizations have started doing is gamifying for actions, right? It is gamifying for lagging indicators or gamifying for leading indicators, right? I've seen organizations create, reward, create recognition. I won't say reward, recognition around performance feedback, around coaching and mentoring, saying people who take mentors under their fold, right, get in their performance evaluation, they get a certain weightage based on number of people whom they've mentored, right? I have seen in organizations, I remember reading about this in Tata Motors, where in their performance appraisal, they have built in the leadership competencies, and how you demonstrate and champion those leadership competencies also goes into your performance appraisal. Performance appraisal is a gamification tool, right? It is you're saying based on performance, there is a leaderboard. Depending on where you sit on the leaderboard, you get certain rewards, right? It's as much a gamification tool as anything else.
But that would require you to, without the details, but require you to be on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
Have a tally or a score that keeps going
exactly
up and down.
You're bang on. That is why I was saying that it's about leading indicators.
Right.
Yeah, there is a constant checkpoint. Right. I can't remember the organization, but I remember attending a session when I was in one of these conferences from a French company. I think it was called 360 Learning, where they had created a system in which anybody who is a certain level and above could take any aspect of the business. Suppose they made a very good presentation to a client, right, in which a particular situation has been, or a particular project flow has been discussed, and the client has approved that. They created a system in which you and I, suppose we are managers, we can put that presentation, drag our presentation from our PPT into the learning system, create notes, right, annotate various parts of it, convert it into a video and upload it. And the minute I upload it, I get reward points for creating content, because that content is worth gold more than anything else that I buy externally anywhere, because it is real. It is a person from experience, and it's something that's of real value to 30 other people who are selling to, clients. So I have seen great gamification around actions and not outcomes.
So that's more collaborative kind of a gamification experience, right? Where you and I have to we have a vested interest of helping each other and we get rewarded for it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Then, of course, there are, you have the Duolingos of the world, and, who are standout examples of, of gamification, of getting you to say that, or if you look at airline points, they will tell you have 37,000 points, but what they will tell you below is 3,700 points to move to gold, right? Where they are motivating you and pushing you to choose that airline over the others. And right below it will say tier benefits.
Right.
So you're constantly salivating about the next tier benefits. And therefore, every time you'll say, you know what? There is a direct flight by Air France, but if I take Air India, there is one stop, but I will get 4,000 points. And if I get that 4,000 points, I'm that much closer to gold status. Let me choose that, right? And therefore, those kind of elements, you will actually, if you look for gamification, you'll find it everywhere, right? We've been doing it. We just don't know that it's called gamification.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now, just quickly to switch over from gamification to games, you obviously have games and, have a subset of gamification, but in your experience, Bhaskar, is there a right duration which makes it rich from a learning context? Is it 60 minutes, half day, 1 day? What have you seen? And for the Gen Z context, because,
okay,
like you said, they enjoy it, but what would be, what have you seen? Yeah.
Sure. So now you're talking about game-based learning and not gamification. That you're moving there.
Yeah.
So the first and foremost, I think you hit the nail on the head, because it's Gen Z, is I always say, take the learning to the audience. Don't expect the audience to come to your learning. Right? So we have to get out of this template in our head that game-based learning or any kind of learning experience that is cohort, where you put a group together, has to be in a certain environment, has to be in this template. We have done projects where we have taken the passage area between cubicles and then converted that into our classroom. And we've said, okay, guys, 60 minutes, don't have to go anywhere. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of continuously learning. But I'm not going to give you Gyan. Let us play a game. And everybody who is in these two lanes, you are with me today. Right? So everybody just turns their chair, they join you, you go through a game experience, and at the end of the game experience, their own blind spots of the fact that learning is not static, but learning is continuous. You can't take a fixed mindset, but you have to operate with a growth mindset. So it's something that will come out of their own, their own sharing.
Yeah.
For that, you don't need more than 30, 40 minutes, right? The idea, we've even designed stuff for frontline factory workers, where the learning experience is 20 minutes, because that is the coffee break time that they have 2 times in their shift. And therefore, the learning kiosk has been set up within the plant and has been done in 7 different languages, because the organization has plant in 7 different locations and they have to be vernacular. And at the end of every small game experience, they are given a sheet, right, that they are reading to each other and saying, and then you tell them, ye aapne padha hai, how did you experience in this game in that vernacular language? And they will share with you that this happened and this happened. I spent too much time doing this. If I didn't do this, I would have saved 3 minutes. And that's what you want them to learn. So I will flip your question and say that don't look at ideal time, look at the time you have.
Right. Wow.
And create the learning experience for that, for which we have to get out of our own fixed mindset, get out of our own templated idea that learning has to happen offsite, learning has to happen in this particular manner, in this room. This guy has to stand here, everybody has to sit there, and this is the communication model. We have to get out of those, frames. Longer duration works well for more senior people because their ability to reflect and assimilate is that much more. The lower you go down the pyramid, it's important to keep it short, keep it very focused on one thing that they're able to carry back, because they do not have the worldview or the experience to capture 5 things and assimilate it and reflect on it, in their head. So apart from those broad rules, I would say that don't fix a time, go with the time you have and build a learning experience around that.
Fantastic. No, very well said. Okay, so Bhaskar, this is a way to close out. What advice would you have for employers, especially in context of Gen Z? And I'm here talking about even smaller, medium companies, right, who may not necessarily have the bandwidth, the financial bandwidth, perhaps just generally to think about a very innovative way of kind of instilling gamification, whether it's for learning, whether it's for their careers, whether it is, for other elements of a person's kind of a work life. What are some of the, just as a way to close, what could be the 1 or 2 do's and don'ts? And then let's also talk about on the Gen Z side, right, where while they are familiar with the games, and companies are using gamification, are there things that they need to kind of always look out for, being a very digitally savvy generation, that not to lose sight and use that as a way to enhance and grow, right? So 2 sides, one kind of the employer side, doodle, and the other from the Gen Z.
So I'll try and be, you have given me 1 hour, I can go on for 5 hours. So I'm also struggling to, funnel my conversation.
We will need to do one more episode here, Bas. That's what I'm sensing, is I've got many more questions, but...
Yeah, but in the interest of time, right? So from an employer standpoint, the first thing I would say is, when you're employing, learn about gamification properly before you deploy anything. Right? Don't take any vendor, even if it is me or you. Don't take their word for it. Do your own research. It's not rocket science. Have a if you're an L&D, and even if you're not sitting and doing instructional design yourself, the basic tenets of what drives good gamification, you have to know. Right? So that people don't throw a templated things that in any LMS or authoring tool offers, because all of them now have gamification built in. Any content you build, you have tools, all of them have gamification in it. So you need to know your stuff first. Second is, don't take Gen Z for granted, or don't think that they don't know anything, right? Or don't think that they are not inclined to learn. What they are not inclined to do is sit through average stuff, right? So if a Gen Z is not consuming your content, it's not because the Gen Z is not interested in learning, it's because your content is not presented in a manner that they want to consume, and they are not coming from our generation where they feel obligated to sit through that because my organization is my bap and I have to do what I have asked. Right? So I would say 2 things really is, do your own research, do your own learning before you implement anything. And second is, ensure that whatever you do challenges the learner at every point in time. And third, and perhaps the most important, whether you're doing for learning or you're doing for anything, never gamify for outcomes. Always gamify for actions. Right? Gamification for outcome is already happening with performance appraisal and targets and, etc. Right? And all that is taking care of it. Everything else should be taken care of for actions and not outcomes. So these are broadly, the tools are, you just type 10 best gamification tools, there'll be 200 which will come.
Yeah.
Right? So, and attending learning conferences, attending gamification conferences are a great way to learn, because 6 months learning, you will be able to get going in about 2-3 months, 2-3 days, right?
Yeah.
From a, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please. Well,
So from the Gen Z standpoint, right? I think we, whether you call it millennials or beyond, we got really lucky and I'm saying this because I think I can say it. We got away with a generation where you could be average or above average and still manage to get some level of success in whatever you did, right? Because India was growing, everybody was figuring out, like in Hindi, they say, Anda mein kana raja. So everybody kind of went through with it, right? It was okay to be part of the flow of the river. Today, fortunately or unfortunately, if you have to be good, you have to be a master at something. You have to have deep knowledge. You have to have damn good. You can't wing it anymore. So for the Gen Zs, it doesn't matter what you choose to do. Whatever you choose to do, there is no way out apart from being really good at it. And you'll only be really good at something if you constantly learn and practice. So there's no getting away from that. There is no winging. It all seems rosy right now. But what you don't want to be is caught in the middle of the bell curve, because middle of the bell curve means you're constantly slipping on the other side. So these are the two things that I wanted to really share.
no, fantastic. What good advice. I think brilliant. I really first to go to Gen Z, very inspiring. I think for them to just kind of, while gamification can become a medium, it doesn't take away the bigger picture as you were talking about. It's a way to engage, and I think as the world has become more competitive, the pressures are becoming increasing. I think let's not lose sight of that.
Yeah.
I also like for the employer that it doesn't matter. There are 10 different tools and there are 10 different people who can kind of tell you ways in which you can gamify, but it's understanding the philosophy, the ideology of what gamification is meant to do. So two very brilliant and super ways to give that call to action or that final advice. Now, Bhaskar, one last thing very important also is where can people find you, the work that you do? Is there a site? And then second, are there resources, Bhaskar, that you recommend, whether it's a book or a website, in addition to, of course, your own credentials at places people can find you?
Sure. So, I would say there are, some of the books I would recommend, I will send you links. You should perhaps put in the show notes of your podcast for people who want to learn the fundamentals of gamification, right? There's a Japanese author. I always get his name wrong in pronunciation, so I will not attempt it here. But he's created a framework called the Autolysis framework. Mm-hmm. The framework is really tells you everything about what are the key things you have to keep in mind when designing a gamification. When you design for gamification, mm-hmm. right? And I'm going to split the resources for the two.
Sure.
Second is there's an organization that I partner in the US called Sententia Gamification. They do master training courses and they have a fantastic framework of motivators and challenges. So, and personas. So who is the persona you are building for? What are the nature of challenges that appeal to that persona, right? And what are the kind of motivations that you can give to those at the end of those challenges? So it's like a three-way grid. If you identify your personas and you know that what are the kind of challenges that appeal to that persona, and when they complete the challenge, what will motivate them? This is a great way to design for anything, right? And I'll give you some links. You can put it in the show notes for people to discover more. Mm-hmm. On the game-based learning side, we run a platform called Kairos, where we have over 17 different games that we've built for educators, trainers, L&D professionals to design their specifically around soft skills, behavioral skills, right? Not getting into the content and functional skills, because those are vertical and we are focusing more on horizontal skills. Mm-hmm. But there are other platforms, again, I'll send you links where you can do the platforms called Gaminar. There's a gamification platform called Gamitize where you can create your own content. There are quite a few of them. I'll share those links with you that you can, for people to explore. But again, I repeat myself that I can do a fantastic learning experience just using a pack of cards. I've designed full day programs with no tools, no nothing, right? Because you have to understand principally how a game excites people and where the learning opportunities are. And similarly, today, if you see Pac-Man, there are people who still play Pac-Man, right? The most rudimentary 2D game of this thing, walking around and, hungry monster eating stuff is still popular because fundamentally it appeals to the internal motivations of an individual in an enduring way for 50 years.
Yeah.
So it's for people who are starting out, I would say don't jump to the tools, right? Understand the fundamentals first. Because if you come to me as a provider of a tool, I will direct you to the things that motivated me to build my platform. If you come to Nikhil will talk about the motivations or his philosophy because that's what drives him.
Yeah.
In order for you to see whether Nikhil is right or wrong, you need to have your own framework or do your own homework, first. And the best way is if you have children in your house, your own kids, you have neighbors, you have nieces, nephews, just watch them play a game, watch them in play and see what happens. Right? All the things you will need to create your gamification are all around us. Right? Just an observant eye will be able to get you those fundamentals. Once you do that, these frameworks will be helpful. Then which tool to use, when to use becomes that much more obvious to you.
Yeah. Fantastic. No, what a great, I like the absolute crystal unbiased, advice, which is that, get to know the principles of gamification, which will help you design very successful game-based learning, right? Without it, it doesn't matter. And it's not about fancy tools and fancy frameworks, but it's fundamentally, kind of understanding that which can lead to this. So thank you again, Bhaskar. I really do hope people look at this as a way to, a gateway of enhancing career experiences, enhancing learning experiences, enhancing the employee experiences. And I think you've shed really good light on, what's the pillar for it, rather than, talking about 10 different kinds of games, right? And I think that was very pivotal. Right. Thank you once again. Very, very insightful, Bhaskar. I'm almost tempted. We will likely have to do one more episode.
Happy to.
Yeah.
So you had a question of where people can find me. I'm not on multiple platforms. I primarily am active on LinkedIn. Bhaskar Tyagarajan is my name. My organization is Blue Sky Learning. If you type Bhaskar Tyagarajan Blue Sky Learning, you will find me on LinkedIn. I post very regularly. I also give out a lot of content and tools for educators, learners, etc. And I am also connected with a lot of people in the gamification space.
Yeah.
Anytime anybody wants anything, drop a message. I'd be happy to point you in the way that to further your own knowledge in the space.
Fabulous. We'll put that on the guest credentials, but thank you for sharing that. And thank you once again, Bhaskar. I really do hope we get to collaborate very soon, as we've done.
Looking forward.
Looking
forward, Nikhil.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bhaskar, and take care. Good night.